This is part 2 of the questions that you guys have asked me. I wasn't able to finish all of your questions in the first video, so now I've moved on to the YouTube community post and there are 99 questions there. I'm just going to go through and answer the questions that have the most likes and I think are interesting questions. So I am going to bring you along with me while I answer the questions, have my cup of tea, do my hair and my makeup. So let's get started. Firstly, I'm just gonna go in and just do what I usually do, which my makeup is nothing special. I'm just gonna do concealer, blush, and my eyebrows and my lipstick. I mean, I don't do anything fancy, you know, it's very, very simple. I am no makeup artist, so I'm just gonna do whatever. Excuse me, I do look a little bit like a speckled lizard of some sort. Are there any YouTubers that inspire you? Absolutely. Some of my favorite YouTubers are Carolina Zabrowska, Rachel Maxey, and Bernadette Banner. They're probably my top 3 that I always watch. One thing that I like about Rachel Maxey's videos, if you haven't seen her videos before, is she always has bloopers at the end, and that's something that I've always loved. I thought that was so fun, and I knew I always wanted to incorporate that in because that's, you know, it's nice having that at the end of a video, having your outtakes where things didn't go perfectly, and it's always nice to have a bit of a laugh. What do you like most about the 50s wife? Hairstyling or cooking do you like best? Hugs from Montana. That's actually a pretty tough question. I don't know which I prefer better, cooking or hairstyling, because I love them both pretty much equally, but I might have to say hair. I love cooking, but cooking can feel like a chore sometimes, especially if it's something that you have to do rather than wanting to do it. So probably hair, because that's always fun. Yeah, so definitely a 50s hairstyle I prefer over cooking. I would love a quick life story. Did you grow up in the city? Did you go to college? If so, what was your major? Where did you meet your husband? Do you work? Do you want to have kids? I'm not married yet. Wink wink. So, quick life story. I really cannot multitask. I grew up in the country. We grew up on a farm actually, and that was where we grew up for most of our lives, and then we moved while I was in high school to suburbia, I guess, to a more populated area, but it was still like a small country town. And yes, I did go to college, which is here we call university, if that's what college is. If college is university. After I graduated high school, I went to uni and I started studying a Bachelor of Nutrition, like I mentioned in my part 1 video. And I met James in high school. We have known each other since we were 12. That's so funny to say. Yeah, we've known each other since we were 12. We started high school together and we didn't start going out until we were 17. We just turned 17 and that's when we started going out. So towards the end of high school. Do you want or have kids? Don't have kids at the moment. I would absolutely love to have kids. That's like, I'm one of those girls that when you're younger you dream about the day that you get married and how many children you're gonna have. That's me. I can't help it. Hello Miss Sage, this really isn't about getting to know you, but I really love your videos. You're beautiful and inspirational. Thank you very much. How would you suggest to go about living the vintage lifestyle? I've been wanting to do this for 20 plus years, but until I saw your channel, I didn't think it was very doable. I'm a 62-year-old woman and live alone. Any suggestions? I'd really appreciate your thoughts on the idea. Thank you so much for your videos and your time. Thank you very much. There's an amazing lady on Instagram called Nikki Redcliffe, and she has the most beautiful hair and she lives a vintage lifestyle. She has all of the lovely old clothes. So here's a picture of her and I will link her Instagram below. It's always nice having some sort of role model to look for that is a similar age. I know it can be a little bit difficult if you can't find someone your age to look for inspiration. So yes, definitely this lady is beautiful and I definitely recommend checking her Instagram out. She has some lovely photos that you can use as inspiration. Just her whole appearance in general, she is very inspiring. And if you're talking about, you know, different clothes to pick up, like I said in my other videos, it's always great to have a couple of basics. So stuff like high-waisted pants or trousers, a nice knee-length skirt, and some pretty blouses. They are definitely three pieces that are essential in any vintage wardrobe because you can interchange those. You don't have to have dresses, but it is nice being able to swap and change your outfits. And I would recommend, you know, if you're not sure where to look, definitely thrift stores. They have some great pieces. You just need to hunt around and find the little treasures that they have there. And otherwise you can find some great pieces, some great vintage pieces online through places like Etsy and eBay. They have some great little bargains there. Lovely picture. Thank you. I have two questions. If you could bring back something from the 50s and be able to make it mainstream or easily available nowadays, what would it be? I would probably bring back the timeless dresses that they had in the 50s. I just think today dresses just aren't made like they were in the 50s. Just even the amount of fullness in the skirts that they had in the 50s with the petticoats and everything, because we just don't have that sort of thing available anymore. I guess everything's like kind of, you know, really sleek and like, I don't know, there's like a hole here or like a hole there, like an intentional hole, but I don't know. I just think it's really nice to bring back the classic pieces. And the second question is, how did you start sewing your own vintage clothes? When I started dressing vintage, I was picking up most of my clothes from thrift stores, and a lot of the pieces I would pick out because it was a really nice style, but it didn't fit me. So pretty much I started sewing and learning how to sew from altering those clothes. So I guess that's after, you know, altering all of my clothes so that they would fit me, I then started to actually sew using vintage patterns. My first vintage pattern that I followed was a 1950s bathing suit, which I absolutely love, and I'm actually amazed how good a job I did on it. Like, you would expect for there to be, like, for me to have encountered more problems than I did. But honestly, I pretty much made it perfect. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really happy with the job that I did, and I'm gonna be using that for many, many years to come. Okay, I need to keep moving on with my makeup. I've done my blush, and I'm just gonna go in and do my eyebrows now. Obviously, I started sewing my own vintage clothes, but I learned to sew in high school, where I was actually studying textiles design. So I kind of learnt some of the basics there, and then also my mum did a little bit of sewing as well, so she taught me some basics as well. And then I just guess I kind of learnt the rest myself. And, you know, like if I encountered any situations, which I encountered lots of situations with the sewing machine and, you know, like stuff jamming and it not working, I kind of taught myself how to fix those problems by watching videos on YouTube and like looking into the manual. So a lot of sewing is actually self-taught, and you learn new stuff pretty much every time you sew something, which is really cool. It's an ongoing learning journey. And yeah. What's your music taste? Do you listen to any music from the 50s? I'm asking because I like music from the 50s and 60s. That's literally the only music I listen to. I love the old music. I actually don't like modern music pretty much at all. The only artist that I do listen to is Taylor Swift, and that's because I've been listening to her since she started almost. I've been listening to her since I was like 12. I listen to all of the beautiful old classics like Leslie Gore, It's My Party, I Can Cry If I Want To, Doris Day, the Glenn Miller Orchestra. I don't even know what else there is. There is just so much good music from these eras. Okay, this question's kind of funny, and 15 people have liked it, so I guess I'm gonna have to answer it. Your accent intrigues me. I get Australian, American, and Southeast England vibes when you speak. Have you traveled a lot? I'm sorry, I don't know why I find that so funny. No, I haven't traveled like at all. I have only been overseas a very, very small handful of times. I've pretty much only been to Southeast Asia. So like Bali and Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia and Japan. I haven't been to America, so I don't know why. Maybe I sound a little bit American or English. Very strange. Maybe from the shows that I watch, I know that that can happen. You know, the more you watch shows that are American or maybe English shows, you end up sounding like them. So maybe that's why. But otherwise, I've been in Australia my whole life, so I'm not quite sure why I sound like that. Okay, Are you active on social media, and if so, can we follow you? Absolutely, you can follow me. Pretty much the only place I'm active on is Instagram and obviously YouTube here, as you guys already know that. So pretty much if you want to contact me or follow what I'm up to and what I'm doing, it's definitely Instagram. I usually do add my Instagram handle in the description of all of my videos, just in case you guys are wondering whether you can follow me. You can. I'm going to move on to my lipstick before I answer the next question. I'm going to do a nice pink. I'm going to be using this lovely red, and this is called Besame Red by Besame Cosmetics. For the most part, you don't actually need to use a lip liner. You can if you want, if you do have the right color, if you do have the right shade to go with your lipstick. But otherwise, if you use a really steady hand, you can get the lip line correct and it won't look too messy. So now that I've got my lipstick done, usually a neat little trick is to blot your lipstick. So, I mean, it does come straight onto your teeth with it being fresh, so give it a little bit of a blot and it will stay put all day. Most of my makeup is done. It's really simple. I don't do much with my makeup. I'm just gonna get into my hair now, and I've just done pin curls. Oh no. Oh, you know what? That's gonna go badly. Damn it! I didn't tuck in the end of my pin curl. Anyway, throughout the times you were learning of the 40s, 50s style, what sources have you used, and or how did you learn how to do it, such as hairstyles and clothes? Yes, the biggest source of inspiration is looking on Pinterest at the original images from the era that you're interested in, and that's just for like looking at like the period accurate clothing, and then you can kind of get an idea, like, you know, what sort of pants and skirts and dresses that they wore, and also their hairstyles as well. You can get a lot of inspiration from Pinterest. And the best place if you're trying to read up and learn about vintage style in general and hairstyling is going to blogs and little websites. Some websites that have great information, such as Vintage Dancer. They are a great resource for learning about vintage style and vintage hair and just everything to do with fashion. Also, Glamour Days is an amazing blog to find all of that sort of information. You learn so much on blogs and websites like this, so I would definitely recommend those two if you're wanting to do your research into vintage style. Yeah, so pretty much with hair, is just practice, 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 and, you know, try and follow different pin curling tutorials and just any sort of thing, any sort of hairstyling. Just the more you do it, the better you get. Does your husband ever dress up with you? What do you think about men's vintage fashion? No, he doesn't really dress up with me, but that's, I've mentioned this before, we haven't, okay, can I just say, all of my curls are perfect, except this. I'll make it work. Anyway, back to the question. As I've mentioned before in other videos, we don't actually have a nice outfit for James. It's pretty hard to find. When I go thrift shopping, I always find something for myself. But a lot of the time, the variety of clothing that they have in the men's section is just really limited, which is really sad. But yeah, so because that's like the main place we go shopping for that sort of thing, for the vintage style, yeah, we just haven't found anything for James. So we need to go on a bit more of a hunt and find him some nice pieces, because he would absolutely dress up with me. He very much likes the style. And yeah, if we do go to like a swing dancing event, he will dress up in a nice shirt and high-waisted pants, but it's not necessarily like actually vintage, but you know, you can make it come across as a bit of an older style wearing something like that. And what do I think about men's vintage fashion? I love it. Men's vintage fashion is amazing. Just any reason to dress up in an old style, like, please, it's just great. And James would look really great in all of the men's clothing. Do you use the girdle you showed on the 1950s wife video regularly, and if so, is it comfortable? Yes, it is really comfortable. It really feels like it holds you up and supports you. So, you know, I know that I'm someone that slouches a bit when I sit down, so it is nice to have something that like holds you up and supports you and reminds you to have good posture. So yeah, it is really comfortable. The only downside, you know, if you are eating a big meal, it can feel a little bit restricting, and my girdle probably wasn't quite tight enough. It's the only girdle I have, so it was obviously the one that I used. But I would probably recommend wearing a garter belt maybe instead of a girdle, and saving something more slimming like a girdle for, you know, a pencil skirt or a pencil dress, where you do have clothes that hug you, you know, so that you're like all sucked in and, you know, shapely in all the right places. But definitely a garter belt for like everyday kind of use. So a garter belt is what holds up your stockings. There are some brands, vintage reproduction brands that have those available, like the garter belts, the girdles, the little corselets, underwear, bras, stockings. They have all of that stuff. So the best places to get that is from What Katie Did and Rego Shapewear. There is also another brand called Secrets and Lace, which also makes similar garments to the other two that I just mentioned. Do you ever get pressure from modern feminists? Do they criticize you for embracing traditional values like what was held in the 50s? Not really, I don't think. I think for the most part, anyone that knows me knows that I'm not in it for all of those values, especially like, you know, that men are the ones that go to work and the women have to stay home. It doesn't have to be the women that stay home. It can be the men that stay home, that can be like the stay-home dads, and the women that go out to work. So I'm not necessarily a believer of all of those values, but I do really like some things from the era, like the family time that they had. They had a lot more quality family time, I think, than we do now. A lot of the time, I don't know, we just get so caught up in technology and you forget about the little things like sitting down together as a family and eating dinner, and even eating breakfast. Like, that's what they did back then. You would all sit down and eat your breakfast, and I feel like we just don't do that anymore. And so it's nice to bring back things like that. I strongly believe in that. My sister's really been getting into all of the liberation for female rights, and I know she has said to me before when I was making the housewife video, she didn't think that I should make it because, you know, that is confirming that that is only what a woman's role is. And I really wanted to make that video because I think it's really interesting seeing that perspective and seeing the life that they lived in the 50s. I think that's really interesting, and yeah, everything that they had to do. Plus, I don't have any kids, so I couldn't show that on top of all of the chores that I had. I just think it's really interesting seeing that. Cool, this hair's looking nice. Who's your favorite 50s movie star? I probably couldn't narrow it only down to the 50s. I would just have to say like an old Hollywood star. If I'm choosing a female, it would probably be Rita Hayworth. Actually, two. Rita Hayworth and Marilyn Monroe. I love them both so much. I think that they had such interesting life stories, especially Marilyn, and they are very much style icons and women to look up to. They were both really strong women, and yeah, they just had really interesting lives, and they were just amazing on screen. Out of the guys, I would probably say both Fred Astaire, because he's just an amazing dancer, Fred Astaire, and James Stewart. I really like James Stewart as an actor. I haven't seen him in too many movies, but one of the highlights is It's a Wonderful Life. I think he's amazing in that, and especially knowing the story behind it, hearing about the behind the scenes and how he was actually affected by depression. And yeah, like a lot of the scenes in there, you then come to watch it with new eyes and see that he's not even acting in some of the clips in some of the scenes in the movie. Like, he is so fully immersed in that. He's just such a great actor. So the next question is, have you made your own headscarves at all, or are they all store-bought? If store-bought, where did you find the ones you wear overnight over your foam rollers? So the headscarf that I wear overnight, that's like a thin cotton. I actually picked that up from Daiso, which is like a little Japanese store here in Australia. I'm not sure if it is international, but yeah, it's just like a Japanese variety store. It was just like a pretty sheer cotton, and that's worked out really well. Yeah, you can find headscarves at a lot of modern stores actually. You can probably find them in Target and H&M if you are wanting to buy a new one, but otherwise I actually pick up most of my headscarves from thrift stores, and you know, they'll just kind of have a little box in the corner where you can pick up, you know, little neck scarves and hair scarves, and there's just a whole bunch there. And I do make some of my own. Yeah, they're really easy to make. I might even do a little bit of a tutorial for you guys so you guys can make your own headscarves at home. Where did you learn to cook, and would you ever share recipes via YouTube? Kind of like a Julia Child type of thing. Your meals always look amazing and I love your channel. One of the new subscribers. Oh, thank you very, very much. That's actually a really interesting idea. I have so many ideas for YouTube. There are so many video opportunities to be had. So I think I'm gonna need to plan out this year, and definitely that sounds really interesting. Doing some cooking videos like that every so often, maybe like once a month. That's really cool. And I guess I learned to cook from my mom. She was the main cook in our house. She taught me most of the things I know about baking and cooking. I have a huge passion for cooking, and I love cooking. I think mainly because food tastes so good, so like I'll cook it because I get to eat it. I did food tech throughout all of high school, and I had like a major in hospitality in year 11 and 12, and that's because I was just so passionate about it. And I did actually at that point in time want to become a chef for my career. I've heard about all the stressful stories with chefing, so I don't want to be a chef anymore, but I still love cooking. I love creating beautiful and tasty food and sharing it with family and friends. There is no better feeling than creating something that's really, really delicious and seeing the look on everyone's face when they taste it. I love that. That's really exciting. As an Australian, do you find it easy to practice your vintage lifestyle, or do you think it would be easier if you lived in America? I don't actually know. Sometimes I feel like we don't have as much available in Australia, but I somehow make it work. I always manage to find things, even if it isn't true vintage. You know, just nowadays you can make things look vintage even if when they're not. But yeah, I do feel as though maybe in America you guys have more available. Yeah, I still don't find it too difficult. You might just have to search a little bit harder to find the pieces that you're after, but still it's alright. It's not that bad. Oh, this is a good one. So happy I stumbled across your channel. It's so awesome to feel like I've stepped back in time. Are there any decades that you actually don't find appealing? Interesting. How far back does your curiosity take you? Can't wait to see what you bring to 2021. Thank you very much. The decades that I'm not so keen about are definitely the more recent decades. So the 80s are cool, but it's not something that I would wear on a day-to-day basis. Probably a bit too recent. I feel like going to a cool 80s themed party is awesome, but it's just not something that I gravitate towards. So probably the 80s, 90s and 2000s is definitely styles that I don't go for. My curiosity probably goes up to about the 70s, and then it starts in like the Edwardian period. Like they're pretty much that whole time frame from the 1900s to the 1970s is probably the time frame of fashion that I'm really interested in. There is just so many different types of fashion going all the way back in time. Sometimes it can be too overwhelming to try and go back that far. Unless I was a fashion historian, which I'm not, I don't necessarily have the need to go back that far and learn about all of that. I still love learning about all of the old fashions. Okay, hi Sage, love your videos. Thank you very much. You mentioned previously that dressing vintage and buying vintage pieces can be quite expensive. What's the most you've ever spent on a vintage piece? This is actually pretty funny. Vintage can be really, really expensive, and I know people that have spent like hundreds and hundreds of dollars on one piece, but not me. I just don't. I'm like, I don't have that money to spend. I can't afford to spend $200 on something, so I just won't. So I really haven't bought anything expensive at all. Honestly, the most I've ever spent on something vintage is probably like between $30 and $50, which is like, that's like normal what you would pay for a modern piece of clothing. But like, I find everything at op shops. I find everything at thrift stores, and even if I do find a vintage piece, they're really cheap. And I do have family and friends that have found beautiful old pieces, or they've had something that doesn't fit them and they've passed it along to me. I'm very, very lucky to have been passed down some beautiful vintage pieces. And yeah, so I actually haven't spent a lot of money on any vintage item, which has been really great, and I'm glad I haven't busted the bank. What's your favorite vintage piece you own? Do any of your friends and family dress vintage as well? Thanks, lots of love from New York City. It's definitely just my sister and I that I know that dress vintage. She doesn't dress vintage on a daily basis like I do, but she is really interested in it, and she has a huge vintage wardrobe. She's the only person that I know personally and I'm friends with that dresses vintage. And my favorite piece I own, oh, probably a really nice woolen skirt. I guess you could call it like a pencil skirt. That was given to me by a lovely lady that I go to dance lessons with, and yeah, that is probably the most versatile and favorite thing that I own. I've been binge watching all of your videos. I noticed that you draw your designs when sewing. Did you go to art school or took classes for either drawing or sewing? Love your channel, Sage. Thank you very much. The only time that I did any sort of art class was during high school, and I loved it. I love art so much. Sketching is my favorite thing to do in art, and I'm actually just teaching myself watercolors, which is actually way more difficult than you think. I have done a little bit of painting as well in school, and yeah. Someone's question is, I'd love to know if you thrifted that sweater vest or made it. I did not make that beautiful vest. I wish I did, but no, I didn't. But this new year I am going to get into doing some knitting and also some more sewing, and I'm going to make some vests, because vests are really nice when you wear it with a blouse. Like, I just think that's such a look. It's like masculine, but also you still look like ultra feminine wearing like a really flowy blouse and having your hair all done and your red lip on. I love it. I've answered as many questions as I can without making this video drag on for way too long. So I hope you've enjoyed this and got the answers to the questions that you asked. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye! Alright, I haven't spoken in a while. Shall I put on some lipstick? When I, oh my gosh. Right. That's what you were wondering. Why would people be wondering that? I don't know. Anyway. Okay. Alright. Why am I literally running out of words? I'm just, what is it? Like a brain fart? Yeah, so yeah, definitely probably